Hi. In today's day, I wanted to share a few tips when it comes to answering ServiceNow's top 5 interview questions. Question number 1, why do you want to work for ServiceNow? Right from the start, I might tell you the vast majority of candidates will compliment and even over-compliment their future employer simply because, it's nice to say good things about them in a job interview. Who wouldn't say anything negative about them? And I wouldn't recommend you say anything negative, but I would certainly recommend you exhibit a bit more commercialism and try, to differentiate yourself from what everyone else is doing. Okay, so if you want to go to the extremes, here's an example. Hey, you know what? I'm not even sure I want to work for ServiceNow as of yet. I'm here to learn more about the opportunity and to see if the type of experience I have could be mutually beneficial for the type of work involved, right? My point here is that if you want to give great answers, you must differentiate yourself from other candidates, and you must find something more peculiar, something more interesting about yourself as to why, what clicks, what makes you the best possible candidate to work there, right? Keep in mind, 99% of candidates would simply over-compliment them, and that's it, right? The second interview question I want to talk about here is, tell me about a challenging project or initiative or product, depending on the type of work that you do. So what is the one thing that you would like them to remember about you after this interview? So what's your best story that you prepare for the job interview? And believe it or not, it does happen for people to have a hard time choosing a story, and for people to choose a suboptimal story that they would like to share. So I would invite you to brainstorm a little bit to find out what is that best story you want them to really know about yourself. And chances are that may also depend on whom you're interviewing with and at what stage of the interview process you will be. You might want to share a different story with a recruiter when compared to someone who's very technical, for instance, right? But you should really be prepared to pick the best possible story you'd want to share in a job interview, because it could easily turn into a deep dive, and the rest of the conversation would evolve exactly on that same project or initiative that you chose to share with them. Also, when sharing your stories with them in job interview, I would also highly recommend you structure them in the STAR format: situation, task, action, and result. Simply because, this is a format that they will be familiar with, and people prefer familiar approaches. And also, to be fair here, to most of you, to most candidates, structuring your answers in the STAR format could be greatly beneficial. You would provide a structure to your answers. Maybe you would never forget this way to speak about the results, maybe even include some metrics and whatnot. There's also other more complicated ways you could go around this, but for the purpose of this video, I believe it's a good one. Also, maybe another interesting point for you could be that ServiceNow also has a set of 4 core values or core behaviors, if you want. You may also want to exhibit those behaviors while communicating your stories. For example, win as a team. Okay, so for example, if the type of role you're applying for implies a lot of teamwork, maybe you'd want to exhibit a time when you won as part of a team, when your team played a significant role in a success story, right? This challenging project or challenging initiative you'd like to share with them. Number 3, tell me about a time when you faced a conflict at work. Okay, so a conflict at work is something that especially technical roles will have a lot of will have a hard time coming up with stories for various reasons, such as, hey, I worked remotely for the past 10 years. Or I'm a very likable person. I don't like having conflicts. I'm a very nice person to work with. So these are only some of the examples I heard over the years. Now, in reality, it's impossible. You've never had a conflict, and even probably more interesting to some of you, if you haven't had conflicts in your career that could also signal that you have never been involved in high-performing teams. Because what happens, high-performing teams, there is friction all the time, and I'm pretty sure you also had some friction at some point, but you are not very inclined, or you don't feel like speaking about that, especially during a job interview. Now, if you want a simple framework on how do you go about answering questions around conflict, there are two types of conflicts: functional and non-functional. Okay, the functional is related to your subject matter expertise, and this is what most people would prefer doing in job interviews. For example, if you're an accountant, you would talk about a conflict over some report you had to make, and you would focus on coming up with the data to prove your point on that report. You would also listen to the other side of the story with the goal to establish trust. Okay, it's the same formula for each and every possible role. And the second type of conflict would be the non-functional conflict. For example, tell me about the time when someone did not like you. Okay, and these types of questions would be more appropriate for people manager level roles. But still, if you as an individual contributor role would be asked, tell me about the time when someone did not like you, you could divest. You could divest towards that example that I just shared with you. You know, when you had a conflict over your functional expertise, and qualify that the other person did not like that you were making that report that way, right? But the important part would be to focus on the data, you coming up with your reasoning, with you, eventually your analytical thinking if you want, and then also listening to the other part of the story with the goal to establish trust. Okay, if you can pitch, some of ServiceNow's core values, I don't know, create belonging, or stay humble, stay hungry, stay humble, that could also be to your advantage, because in my experience, nobody does these things. So if you manage to go one step further from good to great answers, that can only play to your advantage. And usually preparing job interviews in advance does show even more than most people realize. Question number 4 here. Tell me about yourself. So tell me about yourself is the most commonly asked question in job interviews nowadays with pretty much any company. And if I'd have to give a little bit of advice here, would be something that rhymes very well with something on ServiceNow's career page with respect to their interview process. Bring your true self. Okay, so what happens is that I run a website on which people can index, can build their story banks, and I have access to many thousands of these stories. And nowadays there's a huge trend, that of AI, and people using AI to prepare the job interviews. And what I can tell you from experience, I was never ever able to correlate success in job interviews with people who rewarded their answers using AI. So this is why the advice on ServiceNow's jobs page, bring your true self, is something that I find extremely relevant and something you should take seriously. Also, your elevator pitch, or tell me about yourself, you should limit the amount of bluffing you do there, because what happens, everyone is telling you, okay, you should sell yourself, you should oversell yourself in job interviews and whatnot. While in reality, I've had more than a few occasions when people, because of their elevator pitch was, containing stuff they said they did but they did not fully own, then the interviewer went into a deep dive on the projects that were enumerated there, and then the conversation did not evolve into the candidate's favor from there. So that's why, it's better to stay scrappy even in your tell me about yourself, on the reasoning that if you bring your true self, so to speak, then chances are the interview will turn to your favor from then on, if you understand what I mean. Also, follow your interviewer's lead. If they are brief, if they are to the point, you should also keep it to the point. I mean, your answers with respect to the level of length and depth to your elevator pitch, you wouldn't want to give a 10-minute elevator pitch if they introduce themselves in the beginning of the conversation in 10 seconds, right? So follow their lead when it comes to with respect again to the length and depth of your answers, because it's also good advice. And finally, question number 5 I want to share with you. Tell me about a difficult customer interaction. Okay, and here right from the start there's there's a core value with ServiceNow: wow our customers. And this is a huge trend. If you look in pretty much any other high-performing company that's selling digitally, that's a primarily digital business, you will see customer success, customer obsession, these sort of notion. This is on the reasoning that most people are not necessarily customer obsessed, but rather focused towards customer support. So the reason, tell me about a difficult customer interaction would be to find what's your baseline scenario. For example, a difficult customer interaction could be when someone could share a story. Okay, a customer was not happy about this, and I told them, hey, this was not part of our agreement. Still, I tried to fix a few things in there, and the customer was happy. So your baseline scenario would be a service or a product that was not really working well. Okay, so you provided some customer support, and the customer eventually, said, yeah, fine, we're good. But if you want to exhibit high standards in the type of work you do, a difficult customer interaction could be, when something was working really, really well, and you came up with something, you looked around the corner and you wowed that customer with something that they didn't even know they needed, right? So your baseline scenario, again, is a very qualitative one. Okay, so this is what you'll be looking after, to exhibit high standards, high level of quality in the type of work you do, because especially working with customers, most people are not customer obsessed. Okay, so these types of questions around standards of quality do exist in many shapes or forms, but this would be a great way to start addressing this issue and exhibiting high standards in your answers, right? Tell me about the difficult customer interaction. Again, a behavioral interview question, which should be answered in the STAR format. Right, so this would be the top 5 questions I want to talk about in today's video. I hope you found this useful, and thank you very much for watching.